Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/PettyRevenge, where the revenges aren't life-destroying, but trust me, they're hilarious and oh so satisfying. And in this episode, we're dealing with a Karen who won't stop looking into people's houses, and she gets taught a lesson that I know she won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's super satisfying stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your stories to this email right here. We're diving in. This happened in 2001. I was a tow truck driver, and I was working an overnight shift on a Friday. I received a call around 10 p.m. for a baby locked in a car with the keys inside. So AAA policy is to attend these types of lockout emergency calls before any other calls that may be waiting. I speed down the highway as fast as my truck could take me, the whole time hoping the baby wasn't in any sort of danger. I then reached the location, which was a local mall. I found the car to be parked in a corner of the parking lot alongside another car. There were about half a dozen people hanging around. That's when I jump out of the truck, identified the owner, and asked him if this was his vehicle. He says to me, "Yep, sure is." I say to him, "Okay, great. Let's see what I can do. Let's get this kiddo free." I said that as I tried to peer into the windows, which were heavily tinted. I saw a glow coming from the stereo and could somewhat make out a blanket in the back seat, but the tint was so dark that it was really tough to make out anything else. I asked, "Is the child in the back seat?" The guy tells me, "Yeah, he's asleep though." It took me about a minute to open the passenger's front door. As soon as the locking mechanism clicked, the owner of the vehicle reaches in front of me, opened the door, and reached inside to grab his keys off the passenger seat. And then he went to grab a 6-pack of beer off the floor. At that moment, he stepped back and he lets out a little smart-ass chuckle. I poked my head inside the car and looked into the back seat, and there was no baby. This idiot had faked an emergency to become priority. The driver was still standing close to me, and he was in the process of twisting off the bottle cap to his beer, while holding the keys in the same hand. Instinctively, I snatched his keys away from him, tossed them back into his car, pushed the lock button on his door frame, and slammed it shut. I then say to him, "You can go F yourself. Now you can stay here all night." I say that as I walk away and got back into my truck. No one said a word to me, and the driver just stood there looking dumbfounded, holding his beer to his chest as I drove away. I then called dispatch and explained what happened, and they made a note to not send any other drivers out to this account for a lockout situation. Guys, I love this petty revenge so much. In my opinion, OP should have gotten super petty and called police at that point and reported them for public drinking with the intent to drive. And guys, listen, I enjoy a good beer as much as the next person, okay? But I'm not gonna go as far as to pretend a 6-pack is my baby and call a tow truck pretending it's an emergency when they could be responding to more important calls, you know? So, a couple of months ago, during the first half of my workday, my belt broke as I was buckling it back up after using the restroom. So at lunch, I had to run to the local Wally World to pick up a cheap replacement until I can buy a higher quality one. So I go in, buy a belt, and then head back to my car. I get back to my car and then put the belt on while standing at my car. So as I'm putting on the belt, I noticed that a car had stopped in the aisle, waiting on me to back out. It was busy and the lot was full, but I had locked into the first spot next to the handicap space, which was a primo spot. I guess she got annoyed with the waiting, and as I was finishing putting my belt on, I guess she thought I decided to just take a leak in the parking lot in the middle of the day. And that's when she rolls her window down to confront me. The woman screams at me and says, "Hey, do I have to call police on you?" I say to her, What are you talking about?" She says, "Public urination. You know what you're doing." I reply, lady, I'm actually not even..." She then interrupts me and says, "You did. I just saw you do it in the parking lot. You are absolutely disgusting." I tell her I was just putting on a belt I bought. Mind your own damn business. To which the Karen says, "Don't you lie to me. You just pissed in the parking lot. Now if you're done, get out of your spot right now. There's people waiting on it." That's when I tell her, "Lady, I hope you're not planning on getting this parking spot because you ain't getting it." To which she replies, "Like hell I ain't. Get out." And that's when the standoff begins. There's no way that I'm letting her get this space, even if I have to sit here all afternoon. So we sit there at least 15 minutes, with her even complaining to the cart wrangler about it, and threatening to call police on me if I don't leave. I then see my big chance. A truck that was parked about 5 to 6 spots further down the aisle is leaving, and he needs space to back out, and she's blocking him from doing so. The woman at this point backs up a bit, and also gets closer to the cars on the other side of the aisle, so the truck has room to back out. This allows another car that's coming up the aisle to get behind the truck. I then back out of the spot really quick as the truck is backing out, and she can't get around the truck to get my spot. The car coming up the aisle gets behind the truck, and because the woman had moved her car over, the car coming up the aisle goes around her and gets my spot. At that point, I circle back around the next aisle to see her reaction. The woman at this point is laying on her horn. She then gets out and yells at the car who pulled into my spot, and she's livid. Her face is red, she's cursing, she's screaming, the whole 9 yards, and the driver just tells her to F off. In the meantime, another car had come and gotten the space the truck backed out of, so the woman had to keep circling to find a spot. And man, it was sweet. Yeah guys, I don't know anyone in the world who would have happily given up their parking spot to that Karen, especially after that encounter. The funny thing is, if she was nicer to OP, she probably would have gotten that spot no problem. But no, some people can't seem to keep their mouth shut, right? So back in June, I left a very toxic workplace of 8 years. I mainly left due to having a breakdown from being overworked. But this one particular person made working there even worse on top of the excessive work. So this guy was 1 year younger than me. He was a 30-year-old man. He was the type of guy that appears to have peaked in secondary school. Very jock-like mentality and really childish too. He was a part of my team of 4. Now, I was civil with him just because I had to work with him, but he was my workplace bully. Apart from just a general workplace banner, this guy, who we'll call Chris, was relentless with his teasing. What would usually be classified as playful was always pushed to bullying from him, because he never knew when to quit. And if he noticed that you were getting stressed or annoyed, he'd use you as a target of his teasing for the rest of the day. The thing is, he would always be super nice to you when it's just the two of you. But as soon as he has an audience, he picks his victim and he'll tease them constantly, in what he would call playful. And if you ever got annoyed or stood up for yourself, he'd say he's only messing, and make it out like he's the victim. He's that type of person. So one specific thing that he absolutely lost any respect I had for him was when I was still working there, and some ex-employee wrote a very aggressive and angry review on Glassdoor about the company. Just because this person used the phrase that I use, Chris thought the review was me. And as much as I proved that it wasn't me, he was relentless with campaigning around the office that I was the one that wrote it. I also believe that he told the boss that I was the one that wrote it once I left, and that's why I didn't get any freelance work from them afterwards. So after I left my workplace, my old team still has a group WhatsApp that I'm a part of, and we still talk almost every day on it. After I left, the group chat did go a bit quiet, and I assumed they made a new one, which was fair. But the chat still kept going on occasionally. So I unfollowed and unfriended Chris on Facebook and Instagram because I just didn't want to be associated with him anymore. In the middle of the group chat, he all of a sudden broadcast, "Hey, why did you unfollow and unfriend me on Facebook?" The guy writes this message at 6:30 a.m. I woke up to this message broadcasted in the group chat, and it pissed me off. So I was honest. I said that he's a bully, and instead of making a big thing of it, that I'd rather just remove him from the equation. I also said that it was immature of him to do this in the group chat and not in private. The guy didn't say anything. He just left the group chat and he blocks me on everything. The group chat pretty much died after that. I was at the time livid. This guy had set fire to the group chat, saw what I said, and then ran off. I thought it might have been a blessing in disguise because I finally got to say what I wanted to him, and now I don't have to acknowledge him ever again. But I was so wrong. So skip to 3 months later. Me and my husband were walking through town and stopping off at a pub to get some grub. And lo and behold, I see Chris there with a new girl that I hadn't seen before. I was feeling extra confident, so I decided to approach him, and I say, "Hey Chris, long time no see," with a big grin on my face. Chris, looking like a deer in headlights, had the perfect kind of red cheeks. I then asked him, "How are things going? Are you doing well?" He replied in a very normal way, clearly not wanting the conversation to continue and looking awkward as F in front of his new girl. That's when the girl asked how we knew each other. I waited for Chris to say, "We used to work together." So I added on to that, "Yeah, it's quite funny really. Chris used to be my workplace bully. He's the reason why I struggled financially after I left my old job because he accused me of writing a hostile review to the company, which I proved I didn't do. And he lost me a lot of freelance work because of it." Hearing that, Chris was gobsmacked. His face was redder than a traffic light. The new girl clearly looking confused and uncomfortable, but neither of them responded. I didn't want to carry on much longer as it wasn't really fair on her. But just to add salt to the wound, I said, "So, is this your new girlfriend Catherine, or is this Georgia?" Chris, what happened with Sarah since someone said you were still with her last week? The girl goes from confused to angry in the blink of an eye, and she just stares at Chris. And that's when I say, oh, whoops, I really put my foot in my mouth, haven't I? I'd better go. It was nice seeing you again, Chris. My husband, while he did feel bad for the girl, was very proud that I finally got my closure revenge on him. And it feels amazing. Like, I do feel petty as F, but it feels good for there to finally be some consequences to this Chris guy being a dick. Man, I am so happy that OP got the last word in and left that guy completely speechless. And hey, there's nothing to feel bad about. I feel like that's a petty revenge turned into a good deed. Like, let the girl know what kind of guy he really is. So, many moons ago, I moved into an apartment on the second floor. At the time, I was 21 years old. It was a nice place in a decent part of town. So not long after I moved in, I noticed that one of my second floor neighbors kept trying to look into my living room, through, around, or any way possible past my curtains. Now I need to tell you the layout of the apartment before I go any further. From the front to back, I had a sunroom, fully inside the house that gets a lot of light. It faces the street and the neighbors across the street. Past the sunroom was the living room. From there was the kitchen, then to a hallway which leads to the bathroom and both bedrooms. The master bedroom being the last room in the back that also leads to a porch on our apartment. So back to the story. I would always be nice to anyone and would chat here and there with most of the neighbor ladies, which were all nice. All except for one. Now, this woman thought that she was the queen of the street and she always had to know what everyone was doing at any time. The woman would constantly try to look through my windows to see what's going on in my apartment. She was about 65 years old or so. I would always see her craning her neck around to see into my apartment, and I would always try to ask her to stop, but I couldn't catch her in time, and she would never answer her door. Finally, after about 6 months of this, I decided to give her something to look at. So one morning, I took a shower, put a robe on, and went out to the sunroom. My curtains were still closed, as I closed them at night, so I kind of peeked through to look around the street to make sure that no one was out, but mainly wanted to make sure she was trying to look into my house. And there she was trying to look through my closed curtains. Now me, still having the robe around me, opened the curtains, saw her again trying to look into my apartment, and that's when I opened my robe in full view, in the middle of the window. I thought she had a heart attack since her face contorted and she grabs her chest. Now of course, with her being a Karen, she calls the cops to try to get me arrested. She tells them that I flashed her. Well, the cops show up at her place and then they come over to mine. I had gotten dressed by this time, so I go downstairs, open the door to talk to them since I knew what this was about. Cop number 1 says, yeah, so we got a report of you standing naked in front of your window. I say to him, yeah, you want to know why? I'll tell you, because ever since I moved into my apartment, that old hag has been damn near breaking her neck, trying to look into my apartment every day. Me and my roommate have tried to ask her to stop, but she never answers her door. I finally got tired of her being a peeping Tom, so I gave her something to look at. And before you say anything, no one was around when I did it. It's not my fault she was trying to look into my place. That's when cop 1 and 2 start laughing their asses off. And cop number 1 says, okay, I'll go talk to her and say that she can actually be arrested for peeping and making a false report. Do you want to pursue charges? I say to him, no, I think she learned her lesson, but if she does it again, it'll be a little bit more than she's gonna bargain for. That's when cop number 2 laugh again. And they left, walked across the street, and about 10 minutes later, they get into their cruiser, still laughing, and she never tried to look into my house again. If you want to break your neck to look into my house like you think you can, then don't be surprised at what you see, and don't complain about what you see when I finally get tired of it and flash you. Guys, the audacity of that woman, right? To call the cops on OP after she repeatedly tries to creep on their home. And seriously, I have no idea what her fascination with snooping around OP's house was, and I'm actually surprised she hasn't been confronted and taught a lesson before that. Like guys, if I saw a creepy woman constantly trying to look into my house, I wouldn't wait 6 months to deal with it, I'll tell you that. So I've lived in a townhouse for the last 3 years. I live with my husband and my 2 60-pound dogs. And for a bit of background, I got attacked by a dog just before my neighbors moved in 2.5 years ago, which left me with a fear of strange animals up until recently, when I was able to work through my trauma with my therapist. My neighbors have 4 loud and reactive dogs. They have 3 Chihuahuas and 1 Australian Shepherd. They always charge the fence when they see someone on the other side, and they bark constantly. This had prevented me from using my backyard for the last 2 summers. Now that I've worked past the panic attacks and fear, I'm spending a majority of my weekends in my yard and let my dogs go back and forth freely from the yard. My dogs have been well socialized and they don't have any interest in the fence when the other dogs are reacting. Up until yesterday, when the neighbors' dogs come out, I would bring my dogs inside, but it would still mean a minute or so for their dogs to calm down. I would let my dogs back outside to play when the neighbors' dogs go back inside. That was no big deal to me. Now cue Sunday. The neighbors let their dogs out, they react, and I bring my dogs in. The same old routine. Except this time, my neighbor curses me under her breath and she says, "Keep your effing door shut." Now this gets under my skin, so I've started to be a little bit petty. Now when the neighbors let their dogs out, I stay out and play fetch with my dogs while her animals are going completely bonkers, instead of bringing my dogs inside as I've always done. My dogs love it because they're getting more exercise than before. Now it's only been 3 days, and my neighbor is exasperated that she has to chase her dogs around the garden. I have patio furniture being delivered tomorrow, and I fully expect to enjoy my yard to the fullest this summer. After a week or two, I'll probably put up a visual blockade, so her dogs can't see mine, just to be nice. But I'm not gonna restrict my well-trained animals for her untrained ones any longer. Don't appreciate my courtesy, I won't give it. Good on OP for standing her ground, like it's your damn backyard and you should be able to enjoy it whenever you want, right? So OP does come back with an update that says, "My neighbors decided to cuss me out and tell me to go inside last night. I told them no, but I put the dogs inside because the neighbors were being aggressive. They said that our dogs shouldn't be able to be outside and that they should stay inside. They shouted at me to get the F inside and I told them, make me." Which was a bit childish, I know. That's when one of them told me to meet them out front, and I said, "No, if you want something from me, climb over the fence yourself." That's when they yelled a bit more and I didn't respond, and they go inside after a minute. I think the neighbors have finally cracked a bit, and it's only been 1 week. I'm not proud, and honestly, I don't want to deal with this nonsense, but I'm not gonna bend backwards for a bully. Yep, if I was OP at that point, my dogs would never ever go inside again, guys. They're outdoor dogs now. Now, of course, I'd set up a full dog house, make sure my dogs have everything they need to be outside, and make sure they're fully comfortable, but you guys know what I'm getting at. Here's my story. So I got a job as an EMT after a 6-month community college training course, and I was woefully unqualified. I barely knew the basics, but the teacher kept saying, "Don't worry, the new job will train you when you're hired." I got hired at an ambulance transport place that took people to dialysis and things like that. Not emergency services, but there was no training. I was told to figure it out myself, and I didn't know what I was doing, and quickly realized that this wasn't a fit, but I continued to try. On day 4, I was let go. I had worked 4 days in total. I signed a paper with the reasons they were firing me, all of which I agreed with, so I signed. I asked if they had my check ready, and the man who was doing the paperwork said they didn't, but that they'd send it to me. Not exactly legal, but okay. So I waited, and no check came. I then called to see where it was. Now, I knew they were supposed to get that to me pretty quick by law. I called a few times to see where it was, and the boss lady was so rude. She would often hang up on me, not take my calls, and when I did get someone, they would say, "We'll mail it." At that point, I start researching labor laws because it was getting ridiculous. And that's when I found out that they have to give me a day's pay for every day my check is late, which was about $150. So I stopped calling and started to wait. I finally got a check, but it was a payroll check. And it turns out that I had worked 2 days in one pay period and 2 days on the next. So I call again to tell them, and I got yelled at by the boss lady. So I wait another 2 weeks. I got my last check and filed my claim with the labor board for not getting my final paycheck in the time allowed by law. It had been a month by then. The first meeting was a mediation where we tried to settle, and the boss lady wasn't having it. She kept saying that she didn't owe me anything and her offer was $500. She said this was all a setup by me. Now I knew they owed me closer to $3,000 and that she didn't have a leg to stand on, so I refused. She then stomped out and said I'd be hearing from her lawyer. Next, we went before a labor judge. This time, Evil Bosshead had done her research. Every excuse that an employer can use for not paying me the last check, she used. The woman said I moved, said I never tried to call them, and said that they tried to call me numerous times. She also said she tried to call me to get my address, but my number was changed. She then said that her husband was a cop and that she was an honest person and that I was a liar and did this all intentionally. She then goes on and say that I purposely didn't clock in and the times were messed up. She also claimed a ton of reasons why I was fired. none of which were listed on the paper they made me sign, and the judge called her out on that. So I go home, print my phone records, and highlighted all the calls, got a letter from my landlord saying that I hadn't moved, and took it back to the labor board and dropped it off. I didn't get to see the judge again, so I don't know if the judge ever saw it, but I did win the case. Plus, the judge added 4 days because the last check was sent on a Friday, before a 3-day weekend. I was only supposed to be paid until the postmark date, but I got paid till the following Tuesday, which was over $3,000. Also, the evil lady wasn't paying the ambulance drivers double overtime after 12 hours. So I let it slip while I was in the mediator's office, and she said she'd look into it, and I hope they did. Holy cow, guys, talk about a huge win for OP. I'll never get sick and tired of reading about bosses that don't pay up, and in the end, it cost them a crap ton more. And that, my friends, is the end of r/PettyRevenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people, where a Karen tries to steal OP's car and then calls police when he fights back. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.